This is Diana Sullivan in Austin, Texas. Today I'm going to show how to short row lace. Short rowing is a knitting technique where you don't knit the entire row, you knit part of the row, and because you do that, you end up with a shape. In my case, I'm going to make a shoulder shape. Now, for this example, I'm using made-up numbers. You would follow whatever numbers are in your pattern, but for my example, it wants me to take off 5 stitches every 2 rows on the shoulder and make that shorter until I'm down to 20 stitches altogether. So what I'm going to do is use the lace carriage next. I have just done the 2 rows of ordinary knitting, and then the lace carriage selects the needles and transfers the stitches. Now to do the short rowing, I cannot pull needles out into hold because those needles in hold will interfere with the lace carriage. What I can do instead is knit needles back to a position so that the lace carriage just passes over them. For the purpose of short rowing lace, don't look at the holes, just count the needles. On the carriage side, I can decrease 1 stitch only, 1 needle only, and I do that by putting a loop of ravel cord in it and knitting it all the way back. On the opposite side, I can do 4. I can't do all 5 stitches at once. I can do 1 stitch, and then the next row I can do the other 4. So opposite the carriage, I can get 4 of the 5 stitches that I want to have out of work. And again, I'm knitting that first one back with a loop and then taking the into the ravel cord and that's next to that loop and knitting the next one back and the next one back and the next one back. Now if one of those needles had been empty, I wouldn't have bothered to knit it back. I could have just pushed it back, but altogether I have put 4 needles back. Now I knit 1 row, and on this row I can go ahead and take 1 more stitch out of work. And then over on the other side I can do 4 because that's the side opposite the carriage. And knit on back. Now I do my lace transfers. And I'm going to do it again. On the carriage side, I can only decrease by 1 stitch, so I knit 1 needle back to a position. On the opposite side, I can decrease by 4. Well, one of those 4 stitches is empty, so that needle can just go back. The other 3 have to have ravel cord knitting them back. And I knit my first of my 2 rows, and then I do it again. Now, I can take 1 stitch only on the carriage side, then on the opposite side, 4. And knit on across, and then I bring in my lace carriage and do the transfer. Now it's time to do another short row sequence. So 1 on the carriage side and 4 opposite the carriage. And across, 1 on the carriage side and 4 opposite the carriage. Time for the lace transfers. And I'm checking what needle number I'm on. I'm on 15 on this side, and on this side I'm on 16, so that's fine. Now this particular stitch didn't knit through. I'm going to fix that. And in fact, the reason that it didn't knit through was you get to the point where you need to add a little bit of weight. So I'm adding it a couple of inches down, but underneath the area where the decrease is happening. And I'm going to take one more stitch on the carriage side, and 4 stitches get decreased on the opposite side. Now, one of those needles is empty, so that can just go back. The other 3 have to be knitted back with the ravel cord. And I go my 1 row, then take 1 more on the carriage side, and 4 opposite the carriage. And that actually completes my shoulder decreases. So now I can knit to the right, and that finishes it, but I have another step. At this point, you can do one of 2 things. You can either scrap these off in 1, 2, 3 segments, or you could knit across the whole thing and bind off. Well, I am going to knit across the whole thing and bind off just so that you can see the shape. But if you needed it to be on waste yarn to do something else with the stitches, you could do that as well. I cut the yarn. You see it's coming out of the middle of the row, and that's just the way it needs to be. And by pulling on the edge of the ravel cord, I can actually work all of these stitches back onto the needles. Now I've zoomed in just a bit on the left-hand side, which I haven't pulled up onto the needles yet, and I'm doing that same process, pulling both ends of the ravel cord and working all of the stitches back into the hooks of their needles. I also have to bring in any of the needles that I pushed back empty. And now I'm ready to do a bind off. And for this project, I am just going to do a quick loose row bind off. Here's the finished piece. Notice how the lace pattern goes right on up to the very finished edge, even along the slanted shoulder lines. So that's how to short row lace.